Welcome back, everyone, to another thrilling episode of Thrive Program with Coach 2J. This is your host, Jeremy Jones, and today we're going to talk about taking your time and moving with intent, which is really important on these 4 quality workouts, as well as some tips on this particular Metcon. So we've got our warm up. We've got a pretty aggressive warm up, not too crazy, but go ahead and spend a little extra time on the empty bar stuff. Remember, this is our chance to teach people. To give people the volume of repetitions to help learn the movement. So we're going to work on the straight leg deadlift. Again, this is a diagnostic to make sure people are feeling good, that there's nothing there's nothing wonky going on. It's also a chance for you to watch them and see how people move, and make sure they understand the movements and the different names, so they're actually understanding and learning the names of the movements. And then, of course, working on timing and movement patterns from things like this hang muscle clean, and of course the thruster, bar positioning and front rack, and torso positioning. Excuse me. So for a day like today, we've got the thruster here as a dynamic warm-up part, and then we're doing some skill practice warm-up. We're going to work on a challenging thruster, and then we're doing thrusters. So you can spend a little extra time going over those details, and you can also spend a little more time on the shoulder mobility. From a timing standpoint, you can finish up that shoulder mobility at about 15 after, and then spend a good 10 minutes or more working on thrusters out of the rack before we even start thinking about the Metcon, right? So this is kind of like a mini strength workout, and of course you guys know that I've been doing these workouts for a while. That I usually like to have a skill practice warm up be something that's coming up later on in the week or next week, but occasionally I like to have it be the same movement, and it's usually in this pattern where we'll do a heavier version of something that's in the Metcon, because it allows us to get additional coaching in, and people can experiment with different foot positions or rack positions. They can, you can give them the coaching cues that they're going to hear during the Metcon if they start slipping. It's also going to prime their nervous system by using a heavier load before we do it in the Metcon. It's going to prime that nervous system, get more muscle fiber recruitment, so that at least the first few rounds will feel lighter because the weight is so much lighter than what we did in the skill practice warm up. All right, so then shoulder stuff. Make sure people's shoulders feel good. We did some pressing and everything yesterday, so just want to make sure people's shoulders aren't too blown up. And then we're going to work on spending 10 minutes working up to a challenging thruster out of the rack. Now, when I say 10 minutes, that usually includes some of the instruction, but if you want to spend a little extra time on it, you can. Go over the movement with everybody, which you already did here, but you might want to spend a little more time on it, I guess, and then start the timer, so that way people know they can see exactly how long they have to get to work up to their heavier rack. Now, what I have here is out of the rack, so that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to lower it to their shoulder and put it away. When it starts to get heavy, they can drop it from overhead and then team lift it up into a rack. Just because if they were to do 3 out of the rack, that means they're gonna do 1 rep, 2 rep, 3 reps, and then lower it down. So that's 1 extra lowering. On the lighter weights, that's going to be fine. But as they start to fatigue and maybe they want to save themselves for the Metcon a little bit, they can drop it from overhead if you're using bumpers. And really what we're looking for is there's a slightly different technique. The heavy thrusters like we're doing today in the Metcon, or when we're going for something like this, usually the front rack position is going to be a little bit different. If it's a lighter weight thruster, we tend to see the elbows be a lot more low, right? And it tends to be in a lower position, more like what we would see in a push press or a press, and it's less resting on the front delts. But on a heavier front rack, we want to see a lot more of a elbows pointed forward front squat position. And so it's more like what we would see in something like a jerk. Now the elbows can be a little bit lower than this, but the key is that if it's heavy, we don't want all that pressure on the wrists, right? So this tends to be a little bit more, they're holding the bar more in their hand. And so it can be a lot more strain on the wrists. And on this one, it's going to be a lot more. We're supporting that weight on the barbell, because we want to remember as we come down in a thruster and we have to decelerate the bar, change directions, and accelerate. That's going to put that basically makes because of the momentum of the bar makes the bar weigh a lot more for that fraction of time. So having it on our skeleton instead of hanging on our tissues is going to make that lift a lot more effective and a lot less painful. And so working on this style of lift versus a lighter weight thruster is going to be important that people understand the distinction. What we want people to do is basically use a heavier load than they plan on using here. So, usually I talk about the weight up here and then this being a smaller percentage. Another way you could do it would be to go the opposite way, which would be saying, okay, if you want to use the 85 pound weight, you'd want to have, let's pull up the calculator here, you would say 85 pounds times about 20% more than a 3 rep. If it was 1 rep maxes, it'd be different. But let's just say they need to be able to competently do 102, 105 pounds for a set of 3 to be really safe to be able to do this workout properly. For the 135 pound weight, you'd want it to be again about 20% more. So you multiply this times 1.2, because the 2 being the 20%, and you'd end up with 165 pounds. That means if they can do that again comfortably for 3, that means they're going to get, that's the proper weight for them to use in the Metcon. Do I have a scale up here? I don't have a scale up on this one because it's for quality day. That's right. So again, that's one of the ways we can kind of make sure that people are using their proper loads. All right, so we're going to do Blue Stream. So this is 15 minutes for quality. So this means that we're not really concerned about recording scores. We're not really trying to push the intensity like we do in most of our Metcons. Once again, the for quality workouts tend to be in that 60 to 75, 80% range of intensity. Not 80 to 90 is more like a sustained power session, and 90 to 100 is competition and mental toughness days. And so we're really just sort of looking to stay moving and working on form. Right now, this workout's really all about the thrusters. Right, the other 2 movements are here just to keep people moving. They can work on more technique, and again to kind of build that, keep that intensity level. So the heavy thrusters are going to take their time. Now these will be from the floor. So we did the out of the rack for the skill practice warm up, but these will be from the floor. So just remind people the technique, and that when they're selecting their loads, they need to be reminded, hey, you're going to be doing this from the floor. So that does make it a little bit more spicy, especially when you start get to these larger sets. Then if they're doing finishing the 10s, if they're doing 10 or 12 thrusters, they may have to break it up. So every time they have to clean that bar back up, that's going to take a lot more out of them and make the sets harder. So these movements, they should just take their time and use it almost as active recovery between each set of heavy thrusters. Now, after 15 minutes, no matter where they're at, they're going to do an 800-meter run or a 1,000-meter row, or they could split it up. I'm okay with that, but it would be like not a 1-to-1. So you might want to do a 400-meter run and a 500-meter row, or vice versa is another great option. And this is, again, we've just done a bunch of work. People are going to be fatigued, but not totally crushed, because they're not supposed to do this one like a Metcon, like our typical Metcon. And so now they can push themselves a little bit harder. It's still not supposed to be an all-out effort, but if they want to turn it up a little bit, they can. Still feel like they got a lot of training in today, right? So that 15 minutes, and then it's going to take them probably anywhere from 3 or 4 minutes to do the run, maybe 5 minutes, or same thing with the row. It's going to take them 4 or 5 minutes to get through that. So that's going to take us up to about 20 minutes. And you can see even with some instruction and stuff here, then you could actually, if you start this workout with 30 minutes to go, or excuse me, at 30 to 35 minutes after, you'll still have plenty of time to get through the workout and finish. And then for today, we added just hypertrophy. So instead of doing the cash out, which is more cardiovascular based, we're going to do just some bodybuilding stuff so people can work on that. That's it for today, guys. Thanks a lot, and thrive on.